On 27th of December 2023, we saw activists of pro-Kannada group Karnataka Rakshana Vedike go across the city, particularly in Central Business District and parts of the airport road, and vandalize boards. They blackened name boards and also broke down several name boards. All of this after they demanded that there should be primacy given to Kannada in all these signboards. In fact, 2 malls had to also be shut down because of this vandalism. Now, while Bangaloreans are used to this, we have seen this happen time and again. The scale is something that was out of the blue. Many people were taken by surprise. Some were shocked at how many areas were targeted, how many shops and commercial establishments were targeted by activists of Karnataka Rakshana Vedike, which is here known as Kava. Now, they did quote laws. They say that they were only forcefully trying to implement already existing laws, and they say that we have appealed to people several times, but since nobody was taking the law seriously, we had to resort to vandalism and violence in some cases. So, Shivani, let's go back to December 2008, right, when BJP was in power. They brought in something called Rule 24 to the already existing Karnataka Shops and Establishments Rule of 1963. Tell our viewers what this Rule 24 was about.
Okay, so this Rule 24A was talking about how every shop and establishment in Karnataka should predominantly have Kannada on their name boards. This did not specify, what percentage of Kannada should be there on the name boards, but it did say if the shops and establishments are not going to adhere to this particular rule, they will be fined for about rupees 10,000. That was the rule. And you have to know, one thing that we have to note here is that the Karnataka Shops and Commercial Establishment Act of the 1963 was it talked about the working condition of these shops and establishment. It did not talk about banners or name boards or anything like that.
Nothing about the signboard or how much Kannada should be there. Yes. Right. Now, in the next year itself, in 2009, yes, this was challenged by Vodafone. They took the Karnataka government to court. Tell our viewers what happened in that.
So, they did take the Karnataka government to the court, and they wanted this particular rule to be deemed unconstitutional. They said that, they had already spent crores of rupees in putting up these posters across the state, and they said it would also harm their right as a petitioner to appeal, basically change all of these names, because they were already using Vodafone as a name in 60 other countries.
What did the court say to this?
Court did say it was, inconsistent. The rule which was introduced in this particular act was inconsistent with what the aim of this particular act was. Like I mentioned, the working condition of these shops and establishment, which is why the court said that it is beyond the state government or civic authorities' legal authority to penalize people into paying this kind of money because they are not following this certain rule. And following which, in
there was an appeal. The Karnataka government did appeal against
to the state government.
Yeah. When was the appeal and what did the court say then?
So this appeal was in 2014, and the High Court bench again upheld the 2009 order, saying, this is not what the act was made for. You cannot just be adding a rule to an act which is not meant for something.
Right.
And which is why in 2018, Bbmp wanted to bypass this particular Karnataka High Court judgment order, and they introduced a bylaw, which is the Bbmp Outdoor Signage and Public Messaging Bylaws.
Yeah.
Now, Pooja, this particular bylaw is very specific.
Very detailed.
Very detailed, and it mentions, every name board has to have a 60 to 40% ratio of Kannada to any other secondary language.
Right.
So you have to have 60% of Kannada, and it specifically mentioned what unit, basically it can what millimeter should be a certain font be. And the secondary font, this particular bylaw mentioned, which is the secondary language, your English or a Hindi, cannot exceed beyond 80 millimeters.
Right.
And
so it's very specific. Up until now, the law just said that the upper half of the board should have Kannada and the lower half can have any other language. According to this bylaw, the Bbmp said that yes, the upper part should have Kannada, but 60% of the total board space should be in Kannada, the rest can be in any other language. Have I understood that part right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, got it. So this was in 2018. And in August of 2018, there were certain raids that BBMP conducted. What were these raids on and what happened then?
So as soon as this bylaw was brought in, BBMP conducted raids. I think it was about 3,000 notices. BBMP had sent about 3,000 notices to these establishments. But following this, they couldn't really stop people from not putting up boards in English, because it was predominantly English, and especially the CBD area. Most of the news reports said these violations were seen in the CBD areas, which is where the most of the protests we saw yesterday.
Yeah. For those who are not very familiar with Bengaluru, CBD area is a central business district. Roads like MG Road, Brigade Road, Church Street, Lavel Road, where we also have UB City, many malls here are in this particular area. It's a very cosmopolitan space as well, which is why many companies have not adhered to this rule. It's one thing to bring in law, it's quite something else to ensure that it is implemented, and enforcing it often becomes a challenge. In 2019, there were also notices that the BBMP sent to these commercial establishments. What did these notices say?
Okay, so in 2019, BBMP sent an official order. Like, it was more of a threat. They said, if you're not going to have 60% of the space for Kannada, we will cancel your licenses. And they had given a deadline, which was November 1, 2022. But again, we saw there were little bit protests here and there, and nothing really happened. And in 2023, we did have a act come into picture, which is the
this is when again the BJP was in power.
BJP,
right?
Yes.
They enacted the Kannada Language Comprehensive Development Act of 2022.
Yes.
Tell us what section 17(6) of this act says.
Okay, so particularly, I'm going to simplify it. It just says upper half of the name board has to be in Kannada and the lower half can be in any other language. It specifically says the upper half portion of the boards displaying the names of commercial, industrial and business undertakings, trusts, counseling centers, hospitals, laboratories, amusement centers and hotels, etc. functioning with the approval and sanction of government or local authorities shall be in Kannada, and the lower half can be in any other language.
Right. Now, this was brought in 2023, and very recently, in fact, a few days before these protests broke out in different parts of Bengaluru particularly, there was another order that was issued by the BBMP on the 24th of December, right? What did that order say?
This order was similar to the 2019 order. Again, it was threatening the organizations to basically why don't you just adhere to what we have already mentioned in the bylaws, just have 60% of the name in Kannada. And they had given a deadline. They had given a deadline till February 28. Right. And this was after the Karve protesters, basically Karve members, they went to BBMP chief, they met with him, they submitted a memorandum, and following which this order was passed.
Right.
And a deadline was agreed upon after speaking to these people.
Right. And the deadline was of Feb 28th.
Yes.
And now, time and again, over the last few decades, we have seen Karnataka Rakshana Vedike and several other pro-Kannada organizations, take various kind of protests. In some cases, vandalism. In some other cases, they have just gone on a campaign asking people to use Kannada in their signboards. Apart from this being an emotional issue, where they say that in Karnataka, Kannada should be used in signboards, they also talk about how this is a problem of people from the state who primarily read Kannada not being able to read the boards and understand what it is for. While in some commercial establishments, it's okay to not know. In, for example, hospitals and clinics, like you mentioned, it becomes imperative for people to be able to understand what those establishments are. I spoke to a few Karnataka Rakshana Vedike activists yesterday, and I asked them, when the deadline is there till Feb 28th, what was the need for you to go and indulge in vandalism much before that? Their response, of course, to that was that this was the deadline, and the order that the BBMP issued was simply to make sure we don't carry out a protest. Several months in advance, we had announced that on the 27th of December, we will go on a campaign. Now, I want to quickly touch upon one thing. There were two malls that were particularly targeted and they had to be closed down. What are these two malls and what happened in those two locations?
Okay, the attack was in the Phoenix Mall of Asia, which has been in the news since its opening.
Where is this small effort?
This is in Hebbal area, and the protesters were seen, vandalizing, spray painting over the mall areas. And the attack was also seen in UB City, but somehow they already probably were alerted about what was happening. So they had, had security and net on their entrances and everything. But coming back to Phoenix Mall of Asia, we spoke to a few people there, and they said they had already put up Kannada signs, but a few of them were few of the spaces they still hadn't put up Kannada signs, and which is one of the things that the Kannada protesters had targeted, and they had to shut it down. And a lot of people were in fact Twitter users were putting on social media saying we are getting messages, our movies have been cancelled, and we don't know if it's true or false. So it was a very tense situation across Bengaluru.
Absolutely. And the Vedike, the Karnataka Rakshana Vedike activists say that they will continue with this campaign. They did go around initially just handing out pamphlets to people, but now they will ensure, is what they say. Now, the battle for supremacy of the local language is something that's not new. We've seen it in Karnataka, but also in other states like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. Time and again, these issues have cropped up. It is an ongoing debate about whether the local language has to be given importance. Can people come and live here and not learn the language? The social media, of course, is split over these things. But of course, I think we can all unanimously agree that indulging in violence, indulging in vandalism is something nobody supports. Even those who say that Kannada should be made mandatory do not endorse this kind of behavior. Karnataka Rakshana Vedike says that they will continue putting pressure both on the government and on establishments. Interestingly, they did take on the Chief Minister as well, because CM Siddaramaiah has time and again spoken about his love for the language of Kannada, and now they're challenging him, saying that you are in power now, you are the Chief Minister, now walk the talk. You have spoken about being Kannada Ramaya time and again. We will continue tracking this very closely. February 28th is the deadline given to commercial establishments. As Shivani said, will this once again be like we have seen in the past, one more deadline that everyone's going to miss, or will there be more Kannada in boards across Bengaluru? We will track. Thank you for watching.